Hi, everybody. You are at N12D Podcast. I'm Kathy. I'm in Vermont in the US. My co-host is Ramsey in Canada. And today we're talking to Luigi. You're going to have to say your
Sciambarella.
Sciambarella. I ended up sitting next to Luigi a few times at the Science and Consciousness Conference. And so we met there. And since then, I took the remote viewing class through Ubiquity. And I'm so curious about Luigi's work. So we are going to chat today. Welcome, Luigi, who's also not feeling so great.
Well, it's just my voice. So
just your
I'll
voice.
just have the sound husky and wise or something like that, or just ill.
You sound kind of like a Viking or something.
Okay, I'll go for. I'll take that. I'll take that.
I was going to say country music. Go ahead. Viking is
Viking
good.
Or Spartan. I don't know. I'll take either.
Oh, Spartan. There we go. I don't know why a cartoon character popped in. So, Luigi, do you want to tell us about your work in the world?
I'll try to give you the short version. So I'm a trainer for the Monroe Institute. I'm also a board member. And for those of you that don't know, the Monroe Institute for 50 years has been providing courses and creating sound technology that help people to access, hold, experience expanded states of consciousness non-invasively. So the Monroe Institute was the first to use binaural beat technology. So sounds of slightly different frequency that help your brainwaves to enter particular states. But we also created educational programs, and that's like what I teach, for helping people through usually week-long programs. We also do weekend workshops and so on, access these states and then learn to use them beneficially in their daily lives. So that's the very nutshell thing of what I do. I'm also a hypno-psychotherapist. I teach people to become psychotherapists in the UK. So I wear several different hats in terms of content creation for the Expand app that we have at the Monroe Institute, also courses and various other things that people can find useful in helping them, from very practical problems, focusing problems, sleep problems. I work a lot with sleep, to the more, I suppose, esoteric questions. What else is out there, exploring different, expanded states. Yeah.
So what else is out there? I like the way you put it. So what's out there?
I thought I'd just sneak that one past, but no, you caught it. Well, I mean, out of body experiences, lucid dreams, remote viewing. I mean, energy healing, lots of different types of experiences that people have, afterlife experiences, so like near-death experiences and so on. So some of these are less easy to quantify, put it that way, than some of the effects, say, of relaxation using sound technology, where you can measure it on an Oura ring or something, So we do the very, very practical, and then we do the more expanded worldview kind of work as well. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a type of music that does something with your it's called, I believe it's called hemisync.
Well, hemisync is one of the technologies. So the Monroe Institute, like Bob Monroe, he developed hemisync, which was short for hemispheric synchronization, because that's how we thought the technology worked, by getting both of your hemispheres to work together to produce what's called a binaural beat. The science of that is kind of refined a little bit. We know that it's not exactly your brain waves, your brain hemispheres working in synchrony, but rather that the signal can propagate across the two hemispheres. So that's where the synchrony comes in. But anyway, without going too technical, that's a binaural beat technology. And what that means is that you will hear different sounds in each ear, binaural, 2 ears, and there's slightly different phase. So you might hear a sound of, say, 100 hertz coming in one ear and 105 in the other, but your brain doesn't hear two separate sounds. It actually synthesizes the difference. And so what you hear that isn't on the recording is the difference, which would be in that case 5 hertz. You can't play 5 hertz to the brain and hear it because it's below the hearing threshold. So what's interesting is that you get what's called a frequency following response. And this was Bob Monroe didn't discover binaural beats. That was in the late 1800s. But what he did discover was that you could use binaural beats to drive brainwave frequencies to kind of specific patterns. And so if you wanted to get somebody down into the deep sort of delta theta boundary, like 5 hertz, then you need to kind of stimulate it artificially in a way. And that's where the binaural beat comes in handy. So the brain starts to create its own frequency of 5 hertz, that differential, and starts to match it. And then when it's matching it, then it's creating a pulse of 5 hertz, and therefore you would slowly enter this delta theta boundary, which is where a lot of sort of more rarefied states of consciousness reside. It's that cusp between being awake and falling asleep. So this was the technology that then he used in what's called the Gateway Voyage program. That's the first program that he made at the Monroe Institute. And then over time, we've been kind of playing around with the technology, and we're finding out about things like gamma states, which can help people to be even more present within these different states of consciousness. So we developed something called Monroe Sound Science, and that allows us to use not only binaural beats, but like phase frequency amplitude modulation in 3D sound environments, like Dolby Atmos environments. So that's what we're also using in our programs. And in our app, you can choose both. You can use the original HemiSync technology, or you can use the latest 3D sound technology that we call Monroe Sound Science. So that's in a nutshell the technology, but obviously I can talk a lot more and bore people to tears if they need to.
It's not boring. It sounds really vast.
It is vast. Yes.
Yeah. So how does so one of our themes that we talk about in 12D is when people stepped from sort of a normal life, ordinary life, into doing more of this explorative, extraordinary work. What's your story there? How did you get into psychotherapy is one thing. Psychotherapy in itself is massive, right? And
it is. And it's ancient as well. So the term isn't, but the practice is. And so, we have, I'll fill you in then on the backstory. I'll try to keep this concise as well. The short story is that when I was 7 years old, I had a very, very strange experience waking up. And that kind of made me look at things differently and explore different states of consciousness. I saw my dead grandmother, and she looked really well and was coming out of a painting, which really frightened me at the time. I was 7, as I said. But she told me she was fine and in this place full of light. And then I found myself waking up again. And I thought, whoa, that's a funny kind of dream.
Yeah.
And I told my mother, and she says, that's really odd because your brothers just told me the same thing.
Oh,
and so my brother, who I shared a bedroom with but wasn't there when I woke up, he was a cooler customer than I was. So when he saw my grandmother, he had more of a conversation. But we independently reported this to my mother, whose mother she was, the grandmother. And but I mean, although that seemed really strange, I have to say that most of my family got my grandmother coming through after she died, except my granddad.
No.
He was like, what's her problem? When you see her, it's amazing that she's coming through, but can you just tell her, like, why is she coming through to me?
Yeah.
And I'd be able to advise him very differently now, but he crossed over and some wonderful experiences with him too. But yeah, he maybe would have suffered a little bit less if I'd have known the things I know now. Because you need to be in a particular energy space, essentially, for want of a better term, and being open and receptive. I think as a child you can do that very easily. And children usually before the age of 8 have these experiences spontaneously. But I wasn't seeking it out. I wasn't massively grieving my grandmother. I know that sounds a bit weird, but I was 7 and I was born in England. She was in Italy, and so I'd only seen her a small handful of times. So it wasn't like a big grief response. So I didn't quite understand, and I didn't understand the shared experience like with my brother.
Yeah.
That was weird. So this was always in the back of my mind. But as I started to speak with other people, they kind of looked at me like I had 3 heads. So I stopped talking about it. I remember speaking with the priest and just asking him, what do you do? If you get a visit from like deceased relatives. And he just said to me, don't do that.
Oh, jeez.
And I was like, do what?
Yeah, you didn't do it.
I don't know. It wasn't particularly useful as advice.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, well, maybe, and if you look, I mean, I was raised a Roman Catholic. If you look at like Christianity, Catholicism, different strands of it, they'll tell you don't mess with that stuff. There's a lot of belief in the afterlife, but if the afterlife speaks to you, there's a problem.
Right. Right.
You can pray to God, but if God answers, it's weird.
Yeah.
If somebody says something from the other side, it's like, it could be the devil trying to tempt you, or just this kind of stuff. So I was like, oh no, this is baloney. That doesn't really fit my experience. So I was always interested in this, but then I didn't really have a means to explore it. So it was only really when I started looking into psychology that I thought, maybe people are interested in exploring mind. They'll have worked something out by now. So I studied psychology, and I studied psychology as an undergraduate at Manchester. And I quickly found out that these states are just explained away. Actually, your very existence is explained away as an epiphenomenon. It's a byproduct of neurons just doing stuff. And that didn't sit with me either. Don't know about you guys, but that doesn't work.
Well, once you've had one of those,
down.
If you have those experiences, it doesn't work. You can't just say, it's just this neurons.
But exactly, and at university, then I actually came across hypnosis, and there was a fellow student who was a hypnotherapist. He was a mature student, and we got on really well. So he was like, hey, why don't you have a go with some hypnosis? And I thought, well, I've heard that it's a bit bull, but go on, I'll do it. And I wasn't doing hypnosis like I do now with my therapy clients. It was more exploratory. How low can you go? Let's see what happens. So really deep trance states for hours every day. Just Esdale states. I mean, like super deep trance states. And out of that, I spontaneously started having out-of-body experiences and lucid dreams. So I've never taken recreationally a drug in my life. I've actually done it under controlled conditions, but that's another story. But, I was never interested in it. And while fellow students might have been experimenting with all kinds of mind-altering substances, I can honestly say I did it au natural. So I was having these experiences, and some of them were pretty, I wouldn't say scary, but pretty full on. Intense. So I was getting the vibrational state, which is not for everybody, but for some, a precursor to the out-of-body experience. And for me, it felt like a train was going through me. It was so violent. I was just like vibrating. Vibration doesn't do it justice. I was being thrown around the freaking room very violently. And I thought, what is this? I knew it was a product of mind in some way, but I just didn't know what the heck it was. So I
literally thrown around the room.
Well, non-physically, but that's what it felt like.
Okay.
And so I was being bashed. I was in bed, but like I'm bouncing off the ceiling, back to bed and bouncing. So it's like horizontally, like rapidly, or sometimes side to side, rattled. So I was thinking, what the heck is this? So I came across the work of Bob Monroe. I read, I got all 3 books. I read Journeys Out of the Body, and immediately he's talking about the same stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing, because here's a guy, for those of you that don't know, Bob Monroe, who created the Monroe Institute, didn't intend to create the Monroe Institute. He was a businessman from the 50s. He was born in the 20s, but he made his fortune in the 50s, worked in radio broadcasting, and he started investigating sleep learning because that was a fad at the time. Can you learn languages in your sleep and all that? So he put his sound research division on task to look at whether you could learn during sleep. And one of the primary problems is you need people to be asleep to test, right? So he started to play with different sounds that could help people to get to sleep, and he was the primary guinea pig. So through that, he started having spontaneous out-of-body experiences. But before he did, he had like a year's worth of the vibrational state. He thought he was going nuts and having neurological problems and all this kind of stuff. He checked out. Physicians would just say, maybe you're a bit stressed because of work, Bob, but just go to sleep. You're okay. Very high functioning. So he's like, okay, well, maybe I'm all right. So he would just watch these things going. And then he started to stimulate out-of-body experiences, but he did it accidentally the first time. So the first time he's lying in bed, and he used to fly glider planes. I'll come back to my story in a moment, but this makes sense. And he was thinking while the vibrational state was happening about how much fun it would be to fly the next day because the conditions were just right. And then he finds himself on the ceiling, and he turns around and he sees his body in bed, and he panics because he thinks he's died. Right. So he starts to document these experiences. And first of all, it's like, oh my God, am I dying? Is something wrong with me? And then over a period of 12 years, he's cataloging all of these and what he can do in these states. And that became Journeys Out of the Body, his first book. And, through the work with Professor Charles Tart, who recently passed away, unfortunately, the guy who literally wrote the book, Altered States of Consciousness, he popularized the term out-of-body experience. It was a term that was first used by Tyrell in his book Apparitions in the 20s. But, it was Bob Monroe and Charles Tart who popularized it. So I came across this and I thought, well, if he learned to utilize it and harness it and be deliberate, then maybe I can too. And I started to practice really deliberate techniques for exiting the body. And I found myself exiting and landing at the foot of my bed in my uni digs. But this was happening at like 3 a.m. And even students are asleep at that time, surprisingly. So I thought, let's see if I can validate something. So I had to go out in the hallway, and, you're in the student halls of residence. There's empty bottles of Jack Daniels. There's pizza boxes. I mean, I'm thinking your mind could absorb that. That isn't a good test for me. And so I tried to go outside and see if there were, maybe some cars and stuff. And I'm thinking, yeah, but, maybe unconsciously I've taken it in. And because I'd noticed things that and I've said this elsewhere, but I remember being really excited one night when I can hear some commotion outside, and I go outside and there's a fox like rummaging in some bins outside. And I thought, oh, wow, well, that's a spontaneous thing. Let me go back to my body. And I went back to my body and went to the window, and there's a fox rummaging in bins. And I'm like,
yeah,
yes. But then I look around, it's like there's no one to high five, there's
Right.
no one to celebrate that. And I thought, what the heck do you do with this,
Yeah.
So I got bored of it actually very quickly. I was calling for guidance, that's what people tend to do. Nothing. Tumbleweed going on with my guides. They're like, yeah, forget that guy. So I don't know what their problem was at the time, but I wasn't getting anything. I didn't get the Native American or the Chinese guy with the long beard or anything. I wasn't getting anything like that. So I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. It confirms a kind of worldview that I already had, which is that you're more than your physical body. So that wasn't that dramatic for me. The conversation, although brief, with my grandmother kind of told me that life continues beyond physical death. So, I wasn't really looking at that either. I know that's one of the major things that people understand when they have out-of-body experiences. That wasn't a big thing for me. So I thought, how can I use this state? And as if by chance, I came across a book by Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche called The Tibetan Yogas of Dream and Sleep. And there, with dream yoga, they use out-of-body experiences as a way of kind of exploring in between states, afterlife states, but the bardos. And they talk about in the head and out of the head experiences. So out of the head is the out of body, essentially. In the head, that's the lucid dream. And I thought, I wonder if I can use the out of body state to explore lucid dreaming. So that's how I did it, which is often the opposite way to how most people want to do it. They want to have a lucid dream and then go into the out of body experience. I went the other way. And when I went inside my own head, essentially, then I found a territory teeming with life, because it was all parts of me. And so I used it very psychotherapeutically to explore maybe aspects of myself that I'd not spent so much time with before, doing kind of shadow integration type of work and essentially uncovering my blind spots. So I found that really, really practical and really, really useful. And I also use it as a study aid. I was able to absorb information exponentially. I wish I kept that capacity now, because it was so intense the way I was working. But I could memorize. I don't have an eidetic memory, but I'd given myself one through that practice. I could conjure up a textbook and know what page things were on and so on. I aced my exams. I've got the degree to prove it. Yeah.
So it was like your mind was in a different way while you were doing these practices.
Very much so. It was so super sharp, and I mean, it still is in when I meditate in that space. So when you talk about where you can go with these sorts of things, the territory is incredibly vast. This is why I really like the Monroe Institute's approach, because they said, here's an environment, here's some tools, go and play and find out for yourself. That was Bob's main thing. And I thought, yeah, sure, I'll go and play. So I after finishing uni, to cut a long story, I went to Gateway, and I found that to be a wonderful experience after sleeping the first few days and getting frustrated, but I found it to be a wonderful experience. And then I went and did the guidelines program the year afterwards. And I thought, gosh, people really need to know about this. And there was nothing going on in England, in the UK in general. And the guidance that I got was, well, why don't you do it? And at the time, I was using psychology for the dark arts of purchasing, supply chain, negotiations, and it was soul destroying, but very practical and paid the bills, and so I don't bemoan it. I bought my house and whatever else with it, but I had this double life for a long time. I was using all of my holiday time, all of my weekend time to cultivate the training and practice that I then started delivering in 2010 when I started up as a trainer. And then more and more, I moved into that world. But you were talking about psychotherapy, and the reason why I got into that was because as I did the weekend workshops, I found that some participants really needed more support, being able to integrate the experiences that they were having, and their minds are blown. How do you fit back into your physical life experience when your mind's blown up and maybe some of the things that you've been doing for the last 20 years are no longer valid? It's a huge shift for a lot of people. So that integration might need a little bit of one-on-one assistance. So I trained up as a psychotherapist, and I found that those tools were really, really beneficial in the groups. But then, through that practice, then I also started to work one-on-one with people who had like anxiety, depression, sleep problems in particular. And because I knew the territory, it made it a lot easier to be able to work with those populations. Like how your mind creates reality narratives, and then how you can get out of these trances that we live by, that are cultural hypnosis, essentially, how to undo some of that damage and create a better story for yourself. So, bit by bit, that's how I've got roped into more and more into the Monroe Institute's system and getting these tools out to people so that they can really understand at a deepest level possible, not only that they're more than their physical body, but that they're more than the story they tell themselves about themselves, more than the story that they've been told about themselves that keep
Yeah.
them locked into a box, which
Right.
is so limiting, and
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be there anymore. So this is the hope with the way that we're trying to get it out, not only with the residential programs, but with the shorter programs globally, with the app, with the online. We're just trying to get things out there as much as possible so that people can find out for themselves.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like your trauma is are ropes around you, and you get smaller and it gets tighter.
Oh, most definitely. The world shrinks when you're anxious. Then it becomes self-fulfilling.
Yeah.
There's a self-fulfilling prophecy that happens. I'm a loser, so I don't go out there to find counter evidence. So because I don't find counter evidence, that proves I'm a loser. And you end up in these vicious mental cycles, that are really hard to break, on your own. But the beauty is, I mean, therapy works really well actually with a lot of those kind of narratives. But not everybody can afford it or have the time for it, and so on. Access to it, there's a mental health crisis everywhere, and it's a pandemic of epic proportions that is just being swept under the carpet. And I suffer with my clients when I see how easy it could be to get these tools to kids, so that they build resilience at a much earlier age, and that they don't have to be raised in such restrictive environments mentally. The parents don't even know that they're restrictive environments. So we have a lot of work to do. It's not just about exploring expanded states. That helps to give you the bigger picture, and so that you can hold space for bringing new energy in, perhaps. But we really need a lot more people involved here so that there's societal structural changes, because there's a lot of people suffering silently and loudly, but silently especially. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions for you regarding. You talked about the guideline program, which is a week, I think, or 5-6
Yes.
days. But
Yes,
also, does that include different focus well, I don't know if they're called programs, but what are they called?
Focus levels.
Focus levels. Yeah, thank you. I was trying to look for the word. Do they include those different focus levels? Let's say 15, 21, and so on.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So how does that work within the mind framework so that it alter the way you're perceiving reality?
Yeah, it's a great question. This is so topical as well, because a lot of people find us because of there's a document that's been declassified by the CIA where the army came to the institute and we're trying to train psychic spies, and I mean, obviously that sounds really exciting. And they talk about the focus levels, these different states of consciousness that we use in Gateway in particular and beyond. But Bob Monroe didn't have the focus levels to begin with. He had a technique for entering a mind awake, body asleep state. So how to move the body story into the background so that your mind is free to wander. And people experience this to varying degrees. Some people really feel that their body can't move at all, like sleep paralysis. Others are just ignoring the body. Like if you're in deep trance, you could move if you put a lot of effort, but actually feels so good you don't want to move. So you just ignore it, Most of the time we're ignoring our body anyway. You're not thinking about your right foot right now or the top of your head. You probably are now that I've mentioned them. But, we kind of create a body as we need one, right? So most of the time we're in our eyes, in our ears, in our thoughts. We're not really paying attention so much. So if you could train yourself to let your body image really move into the background while your mind stays awake, this is the state of mind awake, body asleep. And that was the first state of consciousness that was mapped out by Bob and what was called the Explorer team, which was a team of volunteers who went in the lab with Bob, and they were just messing around with sounds and seeing if anything could be done that could help them to explore different states. And that was called Focus 10, the state of mind, awake, body asleep. Why 10? Probably because Bob used hypnosis on himself. They usually count to 10 in some way. So it was a non-dogmatic, non-esoteric label for a state of consciousness. Let's just give it a number. And then they found another one where people were finding that their experience of reality was more expanded. These aren't people who were talking to each other, by the way. They're all going into the lab separately, and then they're playing with frequencies, frequency mixes, and they're saying, I feel really expansive right now. They call that the state of expanded awareness, Focus 12, just another number. And then 15, the state of no time, or all potential, the void. People usually be rather than do in Focus 15. But it's also a target state for a lot of meditations because you just dissolve the narrative and there's a stillness there. So Focus 15 became the state of no time. And then 21, the bridge between this and other realities, because people found it easier to connect with those who were no longer physical or sources of guidance and so on when they got to Focus 21. Again, just numbers. Then afterwards, the numbers became meaningful because it was a structured system after that. But at Gateway, they don't really have a particular meaning to the number other than to say this is a label, a flag in the ground, so that you can start to close the loop in your neuroentrainment, so that every time you go into this feeling, this sense, say 10, 10, 10 in your mind, and then your brain says, oh, okay, when I think of 10, call up all of this stuff. And you don't have to think how you do that. Your brain will do it. And I know that sounds kind of simple, but just think about your least favorite politician, right? You barely have to think about that person. You could say their name in your mind and you suddenly get a physiological reaction, right? You don't have to say, how do I make myself really tight and angry and anxious and frustrated? It's like your brain knows how to do that. All you have to do is just call that person's face to your mind. And immediately all those loving, warm feelings come with it, right? Right? But I mean, you can do it the opposite way. Call up the pet. The unconditionality of the love that you have from this cat or dog or goldfish, whatever. It will bring those feelings with it. So that's the label. That's the Focus 10 numbering. And the more you do that, the more it reinforces. Now we have a system that actually helps you to visualize that, so that you can look at your brainwaves and see in real time that you're entering Focus 10, and that it gives you the feedback and you can entrain it even more. So we're really pushing the cutting edge for brainwave entrainment. But in guidelines, this was the second program that Bob Monroe created, because he was contacting these guides who to him seemed really external and super intelligent, to the point where he called one of them InSpec, short for intelligent species, because it seemed to know a hell of a lot more than he did, and it made him seem like a dumb species. And this InSpec just kept coming up and teaching him lots of things. And he was in awe of InSpec, and to cut a long story, he finds out essentially that InSpec was kind of a future version of himself, helping out his current self. And this is one of the things that I find fascinating about guidance and about, say, the program like Guidelines, because there's kind of two ways you can play the game. One is to go and meet the external guide, and the other one is to meet the internal guide. And you got external, internal kind of meet in the same place. Sometimes you don't trust it if it's an internal guide, because you think, oh, it's just my thoughts, my intuition. And we're told not to trust intuition because it's this thing that can be fooled. It's the fast system of Kahneman. You wait for the slow system. That's the one that's more accurate. The fast system can get you into lots of trouble. Well, that's just not true. I mean, it is to some degree. I mean, don't get me wrong, Kahneman was right to a large degree when you set up artificial situations to trick the intuitive aspects. But when it comes from a right hemisphere intuition, that's the one I'm talking about as being very clear inner guidance. And we can cultivate that. We can relearn to use it because you already had it when you were a child. It was the bit that told you that something was off and you needed to eat, or you needed to nap, or you needed some cuddles or contact in some way. That's your genuine intuition. That's your inner guidance. And we've lost contact with that because we're told not to trust ourselves. So we externalize it. And so sometimes we need to start with the external to then come internal. So, it's a beautiful program using the resources that we build on in Gateway to then deepen the appreciation and the exploration of the focus levels to make and develop contact with this inner self helper. So that's just one of the programs that we do at the Institute, but I find it to be so valuable in the day-to-day because you're getting this alignment of the head, the heart, and the gut connection, which we're often told to ignore because we overvalue the head, and but I also find it troublesome when we just overvalue the heart or the gut at the expense of the head. You kind of need an alignment, so this is the beauty of what we do at the Institute. Because we're doing that process of hemispheric synchronization, we're using both of the hemispheres in a collaborative way. You're tapping into all of that resource, so you're never excluding anything. You're getting conversation, collaboration with a whole body, whole brainwave communicating and understanding yourself, and then expressing yourself from that position.
Just a quick recap for the listeners, because just in case you're not exposed to the Gateway experience, you haven't done it before, I really encourage for you to at least try it once. It's very simple, and moving through from one focus to another, like Luigi was saying. I think it's the voice of Bob Monroe is recorded on it or something. And it's simple. Yeah. He goes from 10, and then he goes, okay, slowly. And a couple of seconds later, he goes, now we're moving to 11. And then a few seconds later, and now we're in 12. While he's mentioning that you're in a state of silence, and your awareness starts to expand to take over the 11th state and the 12th state. And the whole thing becomes bigger without even having to think about it. It's not like you have to do something. But of course, if you're just like me that try to meditate at night and you fall asleep while you're putting it on, ask Luigi, he'll tell you to do it in the morning, because
yes,
in the morning when you wake up, you're so fresh, you don't need to go back to sleep. So you're more like your body is resting. So you just let go of your body, and you flow with the sounds that are in the Gateway experience. I actually have let's just play this so that to give a taste to our listeners.
Well, now that you are indeed on the threshold of a wave of change, it seems like a good idea to bring up a few points of interest, of knowns instead of beliefs or hopes. First of all, these exercises are only tools for you to learn and use. As such, they do not create change in you. Only you can change you. With these tools, you can effect many changes all under your control. What changes you make are up to you, entirely your own decision and no one else. No one else is as capable as you in making decisions that deeply affect you. Because no one, absolutely no one, knows you better than you. At this point, you probably have at least a suspicion or belief or hope that you truly are more than your physical body. The interesting question is, how much more are you?
That was just a teaser. I really found his voice calming and soothing. You're just like flow with it. With it, and the pointers that he gives is that you are in control no matter what happens.
You're
the driver. You sit in the driver's seat. You're not sitting. Nobody else is taking over whatever is happening within your body.
Right. Yeah, that was a major thing for Bob Monroe, making it so that you're empowered, and this isn't to knock the psychedelic movement that's going on right now, because I think that it's really a great movement, that's showing people that expanded states of consciousness can be beneficial, that you can treat treatment-resistant depression, anxieties, treatment-resistant only in the sense that the treatments that they were giving them weren't treating depression, anxiety, but as by the by, psychiatry can deal with that problem. But what psychedelics don't seem to do effectively, fortunately, is teach people how to get from their starting state to these beneficial states and back again. They kick open a door, and therefore you can get the benefit, but you really need a gentle, structured approach around that to help somebody to prepare, to have the right environment, and to then integrate the experience. So this would have been the domain of the shaman, back in the day, or that only people who were initiated or seen as worthy would be the ones that were taking the medicine, so to speak. Not everybody. This is a tool for everybody, and you don't need shamans. And that's not to say that you're bypassing anything, but because you're doing it gradually, it's a non-invasive technology. You know how to get there, you know how to open the door, you know how to close it. And so it doesn't have anywhere near the level of reported side effects that you get with psychedelics. Not least to say that you're taking a substance that probably is illegal in your country. But the legalities aside, this is legal, and it's available, and we've got a YouTube channel of the Monroe Institute where you can listen to it for free. There's loads of free exercise in the Expand app as well. So I mean, you don't need to be getting stuff that's alien to your body in order to be able to experience the benefits of this. That's what I find really empowering.
Yes, I fully agree with you. Talking from experience that have done both of them. One, you end up in the bathroom all night long throwing up, while the other, while the other is more controlled. And I've also done neurolinguistic programming, and the way I listen to the gateway experience is that there are anchor points along the way that
That's right.
you go back to, and the more you do, the stronger the anchor point becomes, whereby you don't have to start from point 1, you just move to point, let's assume 10, and then so on, and you can move forward with it. It is less strenuous on the body, and like you were saying, it's legal in your country.
Yeah. I will say with Monroe stuff, you do have to go to the bathroom a lot, but not in the same way. We often joke that when we're telling participants, go to the next meditation, go to the next exercise by way of the bathroom, because my gosh, parts of the relaxation response and the way that your body actually removes like adrenaline and cortisol is through urine. So people end up visiting the bathroom before and after a meditation. I remember when I went to Gateway, I thought I had something wrong with my prostate, because I was just like, how am I going to the bathroom so much? But it's you're absolutely de-stressing beautifully. But we certainly don't have purging, and that's a very, very different thing. A lot more uncomfortable.
And no hangover.
No hangover. No.
So if somebody is inspired, where would you have them start? Go to YouTube? Go on the app? Buy a book?
Well, first of all, I would say just read Bob's books.
Yeah.
But don't stop at Journeys Out of the Body. I'm always amazed by how many people just read Journeys Out of the Body and think, oh my God, that was so amazing. And then they don't read anything else of Bob's. Journeys Out of the Body is phenomenal because it was a landmark book.
Mm-hmm.
It was a landmark because Bob didn't have any reference points, and he was having out-of-body experiences and writing about them in a methodical, scientific way. That I was so grateful to Bob writing that. I can't tell you, but he really, really refined his understanding of the out-of-body experience after that.
Mm-hmm.
So what we call the out-of-body spectrum at Monroe is something that requires an awareness of what he called the phasing model of consciousness. You know, you could be here and then there all out of a sudden. You don't have to necessarily peel out of your physical body, see it in bed, and then fly out the window and go somewhere. You can be immediately in two places at once, or, you know, by degrees. So, you know, when he was talking about the focus levels, he was likening them to radio stations. You know, he's still using radio analogies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, these channels are on all the time.
Mm.
And there's a part of your consciousness that's tuned into channel 1, C1 consciousness right now, because it's pretty solid. You know, your senses are gearing you to be in here.
Mm-hmm.
So, but focus 10, focus 12, focus 15, 21, some part of you is in all of these states all at once. And what you're learning to do is turn the dial.
Yeah.
So that might not happen in a classic out-of-body experience, but it might happen in a remote viewing where you're aware of being here in this room right now with a piece of paper and a pen and somebody talking to you and saying, get the target. What's at the target? A, B, C, D. And you go, okay, A, B, C, D. And you start drawing some stuff and saying things and exploring your senses. And then somebody comes in with the envelope of A, B, C, D and opens it. And that's what you drew. Your mind's blown, but you were well aware of being in the body here. Where were you getting that information? You know, that's more in the phasing model. Some parts of your mind extends and gets information from a field, or for want of a better term, you know, something out there. And so, you know, Bob's other books go into that in greater detail and how to quickly be in multiple places. So I would very much encourage reading Far Journeys and Ultimate Journey, especially, which was his last book. Phenomenal. And then, you know, while you're doing that, we have the Expand app. It's free to use. We have maybe 25, 30 free meditations in that. There is a paid element which supports the work that we do at the Institute for helping get things out there. We're a non-profit organization. All that money comes back in and we reinvest it beautifully to really get it to a lot of people. So, you know, that's what you'd be supported if you get the pro membership or whatever we've called it. But, you know, there's lots of free stuff. And then we have a YouTube channel and we do lots of free stuff on there. Make sure you're listening with headphones on because the technology works best with headphones on. And feed the cat, you know, tell people that you're going to be undisturbed for, you know, 30, 40 minutes, whatever it is, so that you're not being interrupted, and have a play. And as you were saying there, try it at different times of the day. A lot of people try this stuff at the end of the day where all their energies are just winding down. So for most people, it's the worst time. I'll just tell you a very quick funny story. Sorry to, this guy called me up. This would have been about maybe 6 or 7 years ago now, probably 10, given the pace of things. And he told me he'd been working with the Gateway series for about a year and not really getting anything every day for a year. And I told him, first of all, congratulations for sticking with something that was giving you nothing for every day for a year. I mean, that's some serious determination. And he said, no, he wasn't getting nothing. He was getting some phenomenal sleep, and his dreams were very vivid. But he wasn't getting out-of-body experiences and expanded state stuff. And I asked him about his practice, and he said, I listen to it every night before bed, every night religiously. I'm doing a practice. And I said to him, go to bed a little bit earlier and wake up a little bit earlier and do the meditation first thing in the morning. And he did that. 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from this guy. Oh my God, I had out of body, you know, classic out of body lift up, vibrational state, hit the ceiling, saw his body, you know. And he was like, oh my God, I've wasted a year. And I said, no. And we know this for a fact. So this isn't bull. This isn't just like, you know, just sweet talking you so that you feel inspired and have faith. Your brain is getting it. When you're listening to these things, even if you're not consciously aware of it, your brain in the background is doing a lot of work. That's why people often feel quite thirsty and hungry after doing this work. So have like little snacks, like nuts and fruit and plenty of water, because your brain is constantly working to create those beat frequencies. So even if you're not conscious, it's going in. So he was sleeping on it, things were happening, but he was doing it at the wrong time for his conscious mind to be present. So that's why I say play around with different times of the day, and you'll probably find that something sticks. So those will be the first places. And then the other thing I would say, if you want the more immersive experience, have a look if there's something going on in your area. Go on the Monroe Institute website. We have things going on all over the world, and they're online programs, so you could be doing it over Zoom or, the comfort of your own home. But then there's weekend workshops that can be in person or online. And then, for the real full immersive experience, then the residential programs where everything's looked after, and all you have to do is explore yourself in a group of like-minded people, which is always really cool. It's my favorite way of doing it personally. Yeah, plenty of ways to engage.
Wow, nice.
And in terms of communities, they're on the app, I believe, are they?
Yes. One of the things we wanted to do with the app was create a space where people could connect. People to varying degrees, and they know. I mean, their data's being harvested left, right, and center. To join the app, we just need an email address because that's your login. There's a chat function within that, groups within that. Your data's yours. You can choose whether you can be found or not. The default setting is that you're private, so you can lurk as much as you want. And we made it so that you're absolutely empowered in how much you want to share and how much you want to engage. But if you want to engage, there's community groups on there, and you can just let people know you're in a particular area you'd like to meet up. In that you can make like groups can say, at this particular time, so like at 12 Eastern time, we're all going to do this particular meditation in the app. So then everybody goes and does it and then reports back. So, there's a way of just getting that kind of connection, continuity. And what I'll say is this, we've met through the work at the scientific, the Science of Consciousness conference. And there's a particular lab at Broughton Hall called WYRD, WYRD. Those guys are phenomenal. And I've been working with one of their random event generator devices, the Weirdoscope. Such a cool device. And what I'll tell you, I mean, eventually we'll publish this data. But anecdotally, I say anecdotally, just me looking at the data, so it's objective. You can see it. The p-values speak for themselves. When people come together, the data goes off the charts. I mean, we're talking things that are really off the scale. Opening and closing circles, especially where people gather together for meals when they're sharing. My God, kaboom! And when people are trying to interact with the box out of body, we just had that last week. They mess with the machine. The data was spiking, something crazy. I mean, these are random event generators. It's two in a box that are not talking to each other, but they're talking to the device. And it's like they're throwing heads and tails continuously. And, so it's like, imagine two people throwing heads and tails exactly the same at the same time for maybe an hour. What? I in one particular session, the two random event generators were doing exactly the same thing for 6 hours.
Wow.
So throw heads and tails exactly the same, two lots for 6 hours. Something is going on. And that's when people come together. So I think there is something really special about a group connection.
Yeah.
Outside of the exercises, I mean, the exercises massively amplify that. That's why we talk about what we do as the HemiSync process or the Monroe process, because it's not just the tech, it's what you bring as your intention and your openness and the group and the facilitation and the environment, and not having to think about preparing your meals or whatever else in the outside world. other things outside of that. All of that is a process, and it's very, very powerful when you get all those ingredients together. So we're trying to recreate as much of that virtually at a distance. I think we can do that reasonably well. But if you want the kind of hallelujah type of experience, that is when people do things together as a group. I just don't think there's any way around that.
Usually communities are the strongest, because when you put all your energies, all your focus into a particular either exercise or an intention, then it amplifies and magnifies. And I remember the weird lamp there when we meditated back in Broughton last year. It started to change color from green into white, depending on the focus that was happening within the room. That was one of the things. And for the listener, you can check it out at the GOWYRD.org. That's GOWYRD.org. They have all kinds of information on the topic that we're talking about. Yeah.
Great people. Yeah.
Luigi, do you have any events that you'd like to talk about that you're doing coming up?
Most are sold out. So
people should pay attention.
Well, I actually have the guidelines program coming up next month, but you have to have done Gateway first.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody listening who's done that, you're more than welcome to come to England to do that. I mean, at Monroe, we have programs every week. A lot are sold out, but we have online programs. In the UK, you can specifically come to the Monroe Institute UK.org website. And if you go to the events or calendar page there, you'll see what we've got coming up. So we've got like a program on sound healing coming up, and one called Exploring Consciousness, which is a weekend workshop if people want to dip their toes. The other thing I'll give a shout to is that we're just in the process of, sorry, I don't mean to add a cliffhanger. We're just in the process of putting together a self-paced gateway, which will be instructional videos with the audios, which you could do at your own pace at home. We're hoping to launch that in September.
Nice.
And it's going to be incredibly affordable. So we really want to make it so that lots of people can access. So if you're interested in that, then just drop a message to the info@monroeinstitute.org, register in your interest, and we'll let you know as soon as it's released, because I think it's going to be a phenomenal way of people engaging with our tools. But the other thing I want to mention is, if you're based in Europe, this is the first year where we will have a professional division conference in Italy in November, the first weekend of November. And this is, people from all over the world will be coming to discuss how they are exploring consciousness and using maybe our tools, but also consciousness development tools in professional practice.
Nice.
So you might be a professional who wants to use these tools. Come along. If you're just interested, come along. What I'll say about the location, it's in a natural thermal spa area of Italy. So even in November, you could be outside and it's like being in a hot bath. It's just phenomenal. So just for the luxury of just enjoying being there with great, the location is just great. But yeah, you can find out about that. We'll put that on the website as well. But if you look for the professional division conference in Italy in November of the Monroe Institute, you'll find that there as well.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll put, after we're finished, we'll put these links in the information underneath the link on YouTube. I see you've got it in the chat.
I'm on top of it.
All right. Well, Luigi,
along with the books. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for hanging in with us, especially with
it's a pleasure.
laryngitis. Oh, I hope you feel better soon.
No, thank you very much. I'm actually grateful to my laryngitis for just easing off enough to be able to talk to you guys. I'm interested in talking to anybody who's interested in listening, and to anybody at home. The materials paradigm is already dead, and we're just trying to bury it, but it's got like this zombie kind of hand that keeps coming out. My gosh. But we don't have to attack it. We just have to kind of get on with doing our own thing. We're living in very, very excited times. We don't know what's going to be coming up as the new paradigm because we're evolving it. But what I do know is that exploring mind, exploring consciousness is definitely part of it. And I encourage you to really do this hands-on. You don't have to take anybody's word for it. You can read all kinds of weird and wonderful stories, and I can tell you all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of podcasts and talks that I've given. You don't have to believe anything I say, anything Bob said, anybody says at the Institute. Go find out for yourself. It's so important that you make this your own. And we provide an environment and the tools for that. If we can support that in any way, we've mission accomplished, So go and play. Have fun with it.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And hopefully you can recover quickly after this with a bit of hot tea. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. Please do like and subscribe to our channels so that you don't miss out on a future episode. And for that, we wish you a wonderful day, afternoon, evening. Thank you.
Thank you.